Seeds of bitter root will grow bitter fruit. A tree without its limbs, where's the righteousness? It's better to be lowly, along with the oppressed. Whatever's in our hearts, our lives will reflect. Help us to be planted in you, Lord. No matter how long the road, even when it's not comfortable, Lord. We got nothing if we don't have love. Let love lead us, yeah. Oh, let love lead us, yeah. Oh, let love lead us. He wasn't born a thug, a mother's only son, no father that he knew. Where does he turn to? Something will fill that space. The streets will indoctrinate. The love of God he craves. We can't turn him away. No matter how long the road, even when it's not comfortable, Lord. 'Cause we got nothing if we don't have love. Let love lead us, yeah. Oh, let love lead us, yeah. Oh, let love lead us, yeah. Oh, if we are in Christ, there is no black or white, there's no left or right. God, give us your eyes, help us to erase the bitterness and hate, so there is only love. If we are in Christ, there's no black or white, there's no left or right. God, give us your eyes, help us to erase the bitterness and hate, so there is only love. No matter how long the road, no matter if it's uncomfortable, 'cause we got nothing if we don't have love. Let love lead us, yeah. Oh, let love lead us, yeah. Oh, let love lead us, yeah. Oh, let love lead us.
All right. Shalom, shalom. Blessings and peace to every single one of you who finds this video. Can you guys see me okay? And can you hear me okay? Before I go any further, let me do this.
If you're struggling with depression and not feeling the comfort and peace that you need.
Okay. I apologize for any ads that are going to be with this video that I'm going to show. Let's see here. That. All right. Well, I'm new to this live thing, so bear with me. If stuff is a little off, just let me know in the comments. But what I wanted to talk about today is this video, okay? This is about Jonestown survivors spoke out, then they were killed, all right? These guys are on Huntley 100. This is filmed in 1980. And what they're going to talk about is what it was like at Jonestown. And this guy was not there, but he did interview a lot of people that were. So without further ado, I'm just going to play it. And I'm going to stop it periodically. And I'm going to relate how it was at Straightway versus what you're going to hear how it was at Jonestown. And they are oddly similar. All right.
1978 is a day we all remember when the rumors began to circulate out of the jungle that a American congressman was dead, an NBC News team had been killed, and people were beginning to commit suicide, or so the rumor went. I watched the news with you with growing incredulity for about 10 days. Then the Los Angeles Times made a mistake. They said, Christian church commits murder and suicide in the jungle, a retrospective. And I read it, a Christian church. And suddenly I realized that all those questions I hadn't been asking needed to be asked. So I flew to Berkeley, where the survivors and defectors were gathering. And I'll never forget rounding the corner onto Regent Street, where this little wood frame house was, where they were meeting. And the press of the world were there, BBC, NBC, ABC, SWAT teams, federal marshals, Berkeley police. And the blinds were drawn, the doors were boarded, no communications were taking place. And I wondered, how do you get through that crowd and find the information we needed? So I just walked through and knocked on the door, and the door opened a crack, and one of the cult victims said, hello, what do you want? And I said, I'm a Christian. I'm interested in finding out the Christian significance of this thing. Before I could finish my statement, being a filmmaker and they opened the door, pulled me in, closed the door, barred it, and I was thrown into a milieu that was most uncomfortable. People from all over the U.S. watching television screens, realizing more of their family had been killed as the news came back from Guyana, weeping, great sadness, great grief. And the first person I met was a man who was in the back of the building, and they said, you're going to meet Tim now. And I said, great. Who's Tim? Well, Tim Stone turned out to be Jones' right-hand man for all those years, his legal aide, a Phi Beta Kappa attorney graduate from Stanford Law School. And I sat down in the little room, and Tim said, how's Dave? I said, Dave who? He said, Dave Hubbard, the president of Fuller. I said, you know him? He said, I've been teaching at Forest Home College Christian Briefing Conference for 4 years with the staff of Christian evangelicals for many years.
Tim Stone had been teaching there, you mean?
Tim Stone, and he had been a Bible teacher at Berkeley Presbyterian at the time he joined Jones. Then I found out he grew up in a Baptist home, gave his life to Christ as a 10-year-old child, and was a student body officer at Wheaton College before going on and joining Jones. It was then I learned that so many of the people who were Jones victims, many more than 90%, were straight out of Christian homes and families like yours and mine. Let me introduce you to some of those people.
All right, before he gets into the introduction there, I just want to relate this to Straightway as well, because a lot of people wonder, why do you even join Straightway? How could you not see this when it happened, right? A lot of it is just normal, everyday people that get wrapped up into these cults. It's not, crazy people that usually get sucked into these things. I mean, there is crazy people amongst them, but a lot of the, cult followers are really just average, normal, regular old people who are looking for more than just what their little Christian church was able to give them.
By film that I met that day. Tim Stone, the second most powerful man in the temple for many years, grew up a born-again Christian in a Baptist home. He attended Sunday school and church faithfully and was a student leader at Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois. Jean Mills, a member of Jones' powerful planning commission, served as a Bible teacher and children's worker in her home church for more than 10 years. Wayne Pietla, a Nazarene, as a child. Bonman, daughter of good Stone, head of Jones' counselors, attended Christian parochial schools for 10 years. Al Mills was chairman of the County Council of Churches Social Action Committee. Dafine Mills attended Sunday school during her early childhood years, but then grew up in People's Temple. And Lena Pietla grew up in a black Pentecostal church.
They all came from some kind of religious background. They were looking for something other than what they had in their own religion.
Some of these people that we've just seen have already been murdered. I mentioned at the beginning that 3 have been murdered already.
Yeah, the death goes on. The entire Mills family has been killed now. 3 of those, my major subjects, have been killed mysteriously several weeks ago.
Somebody said that they were looking for something. What was it that they were looking for?
Invariably, the answer that I got to that question was they didn't find any love in our churches, but they found incredible love in the People's Temple.
The Christian church I went to as a child was not a friendly church.
Okay, I want to speak to that point right there, because a lot of these cults, they talk about love bombing, narcissists love bomb and stuff like that. So the main thing that these people weren't able to find in their Christian churches was a sense of love. And you're going to hear about the love that they had at People's Temple. It's the same thing at Straightway. It was the same thing with David Koresh. It's a very common thing for people who just feel lost and don't necessarily have a good, loving family, or the church that they're a part of is not in a loving environment. Then they seek something that they're missing, and people end up in cults like this. I mean, I ended up in Straightway. So let me continue here.
And I didn't know anybody. I'd go to church and I'd sit by myself. I'd sit there for an hour, and then I'd get up and I'd leave. And there was no warmth or nobody to make you feel part of the church.
Occasionally a person would share a hymnal with me. The greeter might say, "Hello, how are you?" And if I stood in line and waited, the pastor would shake my hand, and that was it. That was all I got. I mean, I knew when I walked out of those doors and walked down the steps that they didn't care and they wouldn't know the difference.
One thing I was very impressed with People's Temple, when I came there, the first day, people came up to me and they talked to me.
When I went into People's Temple, I got hugged. I had people care about me as a human being. They wanted to know my thoughts, my feelings, and nobody had ever cared about that before.
They weren't afraid to say, "I like you."
They all said, "Please come back." They sent me letters. "We hope you'll come back."
It wasn't a one-day, "Hi, how are you? My name is so-and-so." Every time you went to the church, people made a point. We always had to hug during church, Jim would have everybody hug one another.
This is where Jim Jones got so many people. He cared about each person individually.
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking.
All right, I apologize for the commercials that are in here. All right. I do want to talk about that point. Again, it's, when I went to Straightway, it's the same thing that you heard. If you watch anybody's testimony when they first went to Straightway, they say pretty much the same thing. They didn't feel like they belonged anywhere. They always felt like they were different. They didn't feel like they got love, or that their church wasn't lively, whatever it was. And that is one of the big problems. Because when you go to Straightway, they do the same thing. Everybody hugs everybody before the Shabbat. Everybody appears and seems like they care. But let me continue. And if at any point in time you guys can't hear me or you can't hear the video, just let me know. I'm having to click a lot of buttons and stuff here. I'm doing this by myself, so bear with me.
The kind of loving community that they created was very exciting to learn about later. For example, when you went into the temple the first day as a visitor, before you went into the service, they met you in a little room, and 3 leaders of the church, deacon equivalents, would say, "Look, we don't want anybody in our church that's a face without a name. We want to know who you are and what your problems are." In fact, they had a 24-hour policy that if a person who visited the church had a need, like no job, no money, no food, no house, and remember, they're right on the edge of San Francisco's great Tenderloin ghetto, within 24 hours, if the church hadn't met the need of those people, the church leaders were in trouble. So that when you went in and you met a deacon and you'd say, "I need a job," within 24 hours, Jones Vocational Placement Service would have you a job or an interview for one. Then you went into the church, they would immediately, at least 2 or 3 families would see the badge that you were a visitor and would ask you to sit with them. And their task then was to get you home to lunch. So that the kind of warm, loving, then the pastor would mention you by name from the front. The whole church, and sometimes 2,000 worshipers, would have prayer for you and for your needs. Then within 3 days in your mailbox, David, you'd get at least 100 cards or letters from people in the church telling what the church had meant to them and welcoming you. By Wednesday, you had a 10-pound box of chocolates from Jim Jones saying, you brought sweetness into our life when you visited. Now we want to bring sweetness into yours. Now, tell me, Dave, where would you go next Sunday?
I'm going to stop right there. Straightway Praiseland does that same thing. Now, not to that extent. They're not going to get you a job or anything like that within 48 hours, but they tout it all the time. You hear Pastor Dowell say it. We gave you a place to stay. We gave you a house. We got you on your feet. We gave you jobs. We did all these things for you. Where's the gratitude? Where's the you being grateful enough to give back to the community now that we've love bombed you in the beginning? I mean, at Straightway Praiseland, one of the things they would do if anybody new came, they'd always give them one of the best seats right next to Elder Kabir, and they would have somebody else get their food for them, make sure that, they got to eat first. They were trying to be hospitable, but at the same time, it's like you're giving this new member better treatment than the members who are already here. And so it essentially comes off like a love bombing type situation. All right, let me continue.
Well, you see, what you're telling us, these are good things.
We cannot overlook the good they did in our attempt to understand the bad. These were a loving, often evangelical people, many charismatics as well, who were anxious to serve Christ and build a loving body. And that's what the first thing I learned is, that we Christians are the most vulnerable to the cults.
That point is so powerful what he just said there. I'm sorry.
Someone has said that if the enemy, that one that goes about as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour, if he can't draw you up in your religious observance, he'll seek to push you over the edge and blow you up with
Imagine being able to build anything just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
fanaticism, with extremes, and somewhere, in between those two, there's a balance that people must find. Because what Jones has done, of course, in the name of his church, in the name of religion, political systems have done, and political systems are currently doing exactly what he has done. They're exposing people to all the abuses within a political context that he exposed the people to in the religious context.
Well, those abuses, you see, we want to paint big, ugly pictures of Jones and his followers, but whereas in fact we don't want to deal with the other side, the side that how much they did look like us and how close they did get to truth.
That's an important point right there. Is with these cults, because when you start talking about the bad stuff, they will always remind you of all of the good stuff that they did. You know what I mean? Don't look at my dirt, just look at my, this cool garment that I have. Don't mind the spot that's on my garment, but just look at the whole garment as a whole. Right. So these groups do good. And that's what entices people to go in there. If it was a 100% evil, everything was just completely oppressive and tyrannical and all that, 100%, nobody would even try to join. You know what I'm saying? All right.
And so at this point, one of the reasons that people leave our churches and join with the Jones types are they need love so badly. And if we ever learned a lesson from Jonestown and from the cult, with the 9 million Americans who are involved in cults now, it is to create, in Christ's name, the kind of community that is loving, to spend the time loving each other, to spend time knowing each other, to talk after church and before church and create a community of love. But then, for those who got out of our churches and into Jones, we need to study systematically how the deception takes place. And I think we ought to begin immediately with Jones' first technique, and that was he immediately had to replace the old authority figures in their life with a new one, himself.
All right, now I have my little book out here that I do because I
All right, what he just said there. They have to take the authority figures that you had before, could have been your dad, your coach, whoever it was, and then that person gets replaced with the cult leader. In this case, it's Jim Jones. In other cases, it's Pastor Dowell. And Brother Daniel said it really hits home, especially because Dowell is Jim Jones' descendant. I mean, that's an interesting thing. I don't know if he's a direct descendant, but I do know that when he was a part of R.G. Stair's community, R.G. Stair, from what I've been told for other people who were there, had communications with Jim Jones, and that they had learned under William Branham and also this guy named Herbert Armstrong. So if you know more about that information than I do, put it in a comment, make a video about it or something like that, but that definitely needs to be exposed. Let me continue on here.
Try to learn these things. And I would suggest to many of you that perhaps you even jot these down, because we're not dealing with some flight of fancy here. Not only were 970 people either murdered, massacred, suicide, call it what you will, but since that time, the one lady who was standing by her kitchen sink, you remember that in the film, the one by the kitchen sink, she has been murdered.
Her husband, who was the Council of Churches chairman, also on the film, and the little girl.
He was the chairman of the Council of Churches in the area.
Social Action Commission, that's right. And he also has been murdered, and the daughter. So
Now,
3 of these 8 subjects are dead still.
And, okay, who murdered them? Do they know?
That's the mystery.
The police this one only happened just weeks ago now.
That's right.
What, 4 or 5 weeks ago?
Right. That's the mystery.
And they don't know. It could have been one of their other children.
Because as we will see, cults divide families, create hostility between family members.
Okay, I don't want to run ahead of this. I want us to get down. Now, you mentioned the first point, abuse of authority.
Let's take a look at a film clip that demonstrates that with interviews.
Okay, let's do this. And I hope others of you are taking notes as well, because this is important.
You want to go out and tell them something that I stand for about social action, social justice, ask me your questions, and I'll tell you right straight from the shoulder where I stand. And people view me in a myriad of ways. Some people see me as the representative of the I Am, as Jehovah Jireh. Some people see a great deal of God in my body. They see Christ in me, a hope of glory. And it does fabulous things. I could accept him saying that he was a prophet of God, because he was a real good speaker. He was saying a lot of things that I felt. You know, he could express for me things that I wanted to say, but I really didn't know how. Made me feel good to listen to him talk.
He used to take the newspaper and he'd read it to us, and then he would interpret it, and I'm sure it was slanted the way he wanted it to be. But that really, I really sat up because I want to learn. I've always wanted to learn. And
that's such a key point, what she just said there, that he would take newspaper articles and then he would interpret it to the people. We see this with Pastor Dowell right now. I know that he's motivated to do it on his YouTube channel because most of his views comes from when he's talking about political or economic things having to do with America, and he makes money off of that. So he's obviously going to be motivated to talk about that. But when people are worried and concerned about whatever's going on in their country, and somebody's coming with what looks like a biblical perspective, it sounds sound in logic and in reason. That's what Pastor Dowell even calls it. These are the hooks that get you into the ministry, that get you to start listening to him.
So you believe it and you join the church, and then whatever he tells you, you end up believing it.
the more power that he got with people, the numbers of people, and the more money that he attained, the sicker he got and the more he wanted.
Jim wanted all.
It's exactly the same what I've heard from people who were a part of Straightway for a long period of time. They said that as Pastor Dowell began to get a lot more money and a lot more saints in part of Straightway Truth Ministries, then that's when you started to see him become more and more sick, more and more vile, just more and more brash, all these kinds of things.
Allegiance for himself. He wanted every person to only love him. When there's allegiance to one individual person, where this person is allowed to interpret God or interpret things for you, and you accept his thoughts more than your own, I think
you accept his thoughts more than your own. It's the same thing within Straightway Truth Ministries. Whatever Pastor Dowell says, that's just what you got to agree with in your head. And anything else that's contrary to it, you could be believing 100% the truth in your mind, and Pastor Dowell is off. But you're going to convince yourself that you're hearing from the devil, and you're going to actually call your own thoughts, or even the Holy Spirit is trying to warn you. You're going to start rebuking that, even though Yah's trying to show you red flags when it comes to your leader. Let's go.
I think that should be a warning sign.
Jim Jones became an authority figure for me, just like Jesus had in the past.
I feel like Americans, especially young people today, they're too trusting.
I think that oftentimes this goes back to early religious programming that says that you are not really capable of making the ultimate decisions for your life. You need a leader.
Well, the problem here is that we Christians felt
That is exactly what they say within Straightway. Who is over you? You have to be submitted unto somebody. Essentially what they're saying is without these leaders that are tyrannical over you, you can't make decisions within your life. That's why they don't even allow you to make decisions on major things within your life while you're even there. You can't handle having a car in your name. You can't handle having property in your name. You can't handle the money that's given to you. You're just going to end up blowing it on other stuff. So you need to give it to us because we got to act like your dad because you're not responsible enough. Now, a true ministry would build you up as a man and would teach you how to do those things biblically and correctly, not disempower you by just taking it away. That's what they say with people who are in like nursing homes and stuff. They say never do for the old person who's struggling what they can do for themselves because they need to still be able to do stuff. You don't want to make them 100% just completely reliant upon you. You have to try to get them to keep doing stuff because they say like with that, when you're not working, you know, what ends up happening? You just become atrophy and all this other kind of stuff. So it's very important. Let me continue here.
that anybody who carries a Bible around is safe, and anybody who doesn't carry a Bible around is not safe. Whereas, in fact, Jim Jones carried a Bible with him right up until the time of Jonestown.
Wow.
Who are the authority figures in our life, and how do they check out by the biblical criterion of what is truth? Jones, for example, he opened the Bible, David, and he said, "Whose name do you see in it?" And they said, "King James' name." And these were 75% black and from the ghetto. And he said, "Let me tell you who the worst slaveholder of his era was. King James. Whose book was in the slaver ships that brought your ancestors from Africa? King James' book. What book was in the place of honor in the antebellum mansions of the slaveholders in the South? King James' book." So he said, throwing the Bible down, let's get rid of King James' book and release Jesus to set us free as he intended. And then he went out and quoted scriptures right up till the end, including the death tape. So I say to the church, don't oversimplify who can be trusted and who isn't. I'm not here to create questions so we don't trust our pastors. But any pastor who will not hear your question and deal with it honestly is somebody you got to be afraid of.
If they will not hear your question and deal with it honestly, that is somebody that you need to be afraid of. Are you allowed to question within Straightway Truth Ministries? Are you allowed to do that? What happens when you question things? Now, if it's a simple question that he believes can edify other people, okay, well, yeah, then he's going to entertain that question. But if you're actually asking him questions about his doctrine, oh, you're going to get blasted, or he's just going to ignore you.
I think the Bible calls us not to be simply trusting believers, but trusting and testing believers. And when somebody says something to me about something, whether it's in church or outside.
I'll even say this too. Kabir had told us, because he's always in the stead of Yah, you know what I mean? You got to treat your leader like, he's Yah himself. And he would say, can the people test Yah? But didn't Yah test his people? That's what he would say. But we're supposed to test all spirits. We're supposed to try the spirit and see whether or not it's of Yah. Just because you're in a place of leadership, you're still a man. And that's the reason why we still have to test and see whether or not what you're saying actually lines up with the book. You could have been right for the last 29 years. And then all of a sudden you read something and you start preaching a false doctrine at year 30. That still needs to be tested. And a lot of people within Straightway have grown lazy. I was like that too. I mean, I remember for a while, I stopped watching like the news and like really trying to see what was going on. I remember talking with a leader at the time. I won't mention his name out of respect for him at this time, but I asked him, I was like, do you watch the news? You keep up what's going on? And he's like, no, I just get it all from Pastor Dowell. I do whatever he's talking about on a YouTube video, he's going to tell me what's important on the news, which is crazy. Now you're literally the only voice that you're hearing from whatever's going on around you in your environment is just coming from one man. And Pastor Dowell is really not looking up stuff when it comes to what's going on in the government and as much as you think that he is. He's really not.
Of church, I go to the Word and I find out for myself what it says, and I keep looking and reading and questioning until I'm sure. But what we do is we sit back and we swallow anything from anybody as long as he's holding a Bible in his hand.
What are the principles of interpretation that you would recommend? Well,
at this point, I think it would be great if our people would just start reading it. I mean, that's the beginning.
Just start reading it. You people a part of Straightway, just read your Bible for yourself and then listen to whatever Dowell is giving you as a doctrine and compare what he's saying to the word. Don't listen to what he's saying and then try to make the Bible fit Dowell's doctrine. Dowell's doctrine needs to fit within the Bible. And if it doesn't, then you know who he is. Let's go.
All right.
To me, we read simply portions that we really like and feel familiar with, and we don't read the greater truths. Then we don't get into small groups and discuss it and really try to find out what it's about by testing one passage against another passage, by memorizing it, by seeing that it works in our own lives.
Small groups. If you try to get a small group within Straightway, you were considered making a clique. They automatically seen you as doing a private powwow, and now you're going to be Core Dathan and Abiram. You guys are already sitting together. You guys are talking about a doctrine. It's crazy. Do we not all have a mind and have a Holy Spirit where, if you have the Holy Spirit, where you can discern and we can talk about certain things? But that's the problem, is like when the information can only come top down, you're in a bad situation. It's like, I get we're all brothers and sisters and we're supposed to be family, but that doesn't mean that you're friends with everybody. Having a clique of people that get along and jive well is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you had a bad experience with it, because in school, you know, there's cliques and this clique talks about this clique badly, it's just sad. The reason why they don't want people getting together is because they don't want people actually talking to one another about really what's going on.
I mean, it is so complex, and we only have seconds on this program to cover this issue of authority. But the warning out of it is, make sure you test your authorities. And if the person who you're testing says, I'm not interested in your questions, then you get out of that place.
100.
That's like the testing the spirits.
But you know what happens? Like I've seen people who do this to the extent that they become a denomination of one person. Now, we have some denominations of one church, and mostly they pride themselves in being denomination.
I like that he said this, because you don't want to go from one extreme to the next. You don't want to go one extreme where you put all your faith and trust in this leader and just believe everything that he's told you, to now all of a sudden you're just in a family cult. You just start a cult of me, myself, and I, and then maybe your wife and your children. You know what I'm saying? You still got to have people around you that are going to believe similar to you, that can still check you and keep you held accountable in the word. So when people, they'll say that we ain't got nobody over us. It's like, I intentionally have elders and people who I see as being wiser than me, and who I can trust, that are over me. And if they see that I'm off on something, I welcome them to correct me. I even welcome you guys to correct me. If you guys see I'm off on this video or any other video, I encourage the comments, emails, phone calls, whatever. I could be off. I'm just a man, just like you.
Or something. But really, when you look inside it, it's a denomination of one congregation. But then, I met people who really, they don't accept anybody else. They are a denomination of one person.
They become the only authority figure in their lives.
They're the Pope, the Archbishop. They're everybody.
That's what's so important. What Al said. What are your principles? If you're the only one who agrees with the interpretation, you better be careful.
See, we have like I represent, for example, I'm an ordained minister in a denomination which has basically a congregational government. Al is an Episcopal priest, Anglican, we say here in Canada, Episcopal, so you Americans will know what I'm talking about.
We dumb Americans.
And so you have an authority, through the bishops, Al.
Yes.
So basically, we're looking, at different church structures right here. What is your own denomination?
I'm a member of the Evangelical Covenant Church, which has Swedish roots, right out of our missionary evangelical tradition.
Right.
But all three have different polity structures and ways of interpreting for authority. But at this point, the question is to be aware that we do have authorities, often unworthy ones in our lives, and that we need to test them. Now, how you do that within the confines of your own denominational polity, usually they're safe. A congregational polity has ways of making sure it's true. A churchly structure has ways, but do something. Do something to test, because the person who's using the Bible most might be the one who's deceiving you most.
100%. The person who's quoting you the Bible the most might be the one who's deceiving you the most. But I do like this little panel that's here. And yes, American Ofty, they got more flavors than Baskin Robbins. But I do like that these guys on this panel, they are not anti-hierarchy. They still believe that there's supposed to be some level of authority and everything like that. Because Dowell will talk about, we don't believe in any type of authority whatsoever at all. It's not true. We just don't believe in that extreme type of authority like what they got going on over there in Straightway. Bless you, Pastor Rufus. All right, let me play this video. We're about to go into abusive discipline.
Jones also abused discipline.
Jim Jones took all the youth on a camping trip up to the Oregon border, California-Oregon border, near Crescent City up there. And the main reason that Jim took us up there, he said, was to train us for survival in case there was ever a nuclear holocaust or a depression.
Does this sound familiar? Now they got, what, 001, 002, 003 at Goshen? Same thing.
Fascism takes over in our country.
He told us that the country was going to be taken over by a fascist dictator, and that all blacks would be put in concentration camps and all black sympathizers would be put in concentration camps, just like Hitler did with the Jews. And he would have these plays or stage the Klan running through the congregation and have a simulated hanging of a black person in front of the congregation, firing guns at their head and with blanks in them, loud noises and screaming and crying, you know. And
some young man was being disciplined for having drank wine, and Jim says, well, every person in this organization should be whipped. So about 300 of us stood up, and each one of us got whipped 3 times with a belt.
I guarantee you, if Straightway wasn't worried about getting sued, they'd be doing that same exact thing. They'd be whipping their members. I guarantee they would.
And it really hurt. So afterwards, though, I thought, well, you know, you discipline children when they do something wrong. I discipline my children. I whip them if they've done something wrong. Maybe it's not so terrible to put ourselves on a level of childlike trust. This is my father, and therefore, if he's trying to teach me a lesson, I should accept that.
Do you see how these people rationalize in their own mind to accept the abuse that's going on? You'll hear later they are actually grateful that they're being abused in this way because they think that it's bringing them closer to Yah. It's amazing.
Then the whippings got worse and worse. Our daughter was beaten 75 times with a board, and it was very difficult to
Kabir beat DeAndre 39 times with a rubber hose.
Justify that. In fact, while she was being beaten, I hated Jim Jones. I wanted to leave that church. I wanted to take my children to a safe place. But afterwards, there was no accurate feedback. I couldn't come to anybody and say, wasn't that terrible? Because every person was saying what a beautiful thing it was. And even Linda, who had been beaten, was saying, now I really feel like I understand the rules of the church. And Jim Jones helped me a lot.
We need to understand.
See, that's a key statement. What she just said right there is that when you are going through this stuff, I know it's happened with me. For a long while, you think that the problem is just you. You're like, well, everybody else doesn't seem to have a problem. I guess that there's a problem with me. That's how you start taking it. And it's not until the Most High really starts opening your eyes and where people start talking that Stockholm Syndrome, 100%, Brother Daniel, 100% Stockholm Syndrome. That's the best way to put it.
For example, the nature of these beatings. It's awfully easy for us to say that was terrible. But I talked to the girl who had been beaten 75 times with a board until her buttocks was like raw hamburger meat, her mother said. And I said, why didn't you quit? She said, quit. Jones discovered that I had tried heroin that week, and I was beaten because he cared enough about me to stop this thing that could have led to the destruction of my life. So that beating was for her a moment that convinced her that she should never try drugs again. So what the news media decried, the girl who had been beaten, who nobody was asking, was saying, Jones and the church cared enough about me to stop me from doing something that would have destroyed me. So even while they were being beaten, temple members were thanking Jones for caring that much about them. See, in our churches, we wait until a scandal hits and then we kind of duck and hope it blows over. Whereas
I've heard the same type of rhetoric from Straightway. And by that, they'll say that, well, you know, if the rebuke is still going forward towards you, then you at least know that you're okay. But when the rebuke stops, when we stop correcting you, that's when you know that we're just not dealing with you anymore. So people will actually take, well, at least I'm getting rebuked. At least they still love me.
In that temple, they were constantly interacting with each other on the danger points in their lives.
With Base 44, a simple sentence becomes your website.
What do you do with that, David? Church discipline is broken down. There's very little now. And people need, I say to my friends, who do you have that you can confess your own struggle with evil to? They say, what do you mean? I confess it to Jesus. I say, it's very easy to confess it to Jesus and then go away. But you try confessing it to a Christian friend who represents Jesus and who will bring you Jesus' word from Jesus about that, and it gets a lot more complex. So I say that's at least a beginning. Find someone who loves you enough to say, when you confess, that's wrong, that's against the scriptural law, and that's going to be destructive in your life. I'm going to pray that you'll be forgiven, but at the same time, I'm going to be there to help you keep from succumbing to it.
All right, here we go. From the phones, someone called in, saw the movie, wanted to find out if it's true about the chicken insides being used to try and fake a healing of some kind.
That's very difficult to deal with, but just quickly, David, this is what Jim Jones said to his deacons. You know the power of faith? What happens when faith gets going in people? Do you mind if I dramatize some healings so that the power of faith will be charged up in people? So these chicken miracles and other miracles that he faked were his attempts to dramatize the power of faith and get it flowing in other people. And I hate to tell you this, but in dozens of the people that I interviewed over the past 18, 19 months now were people who had actually been healed in those services and say they can't deny it.
Someone wants to know if you've
Thank you, Brother Daniel. Sorry about that. I want to go about that point that you just said there, or that he just said. There was people who were healed in the ministry. Okay, so there, I think he said 19 some people that they can't deny the fact that they were healed. So because Jim Jones is really good at stirring people up in their faith, people met the conditions of faith and they actually got healed by Jesus. And so should we go and follow Jim Jones's ministry and all of his doctrines because some people were healed actually in his ministry? Because Dowell will say, well, there's people who, if Yah isn't for them, then how are these miracles still going forward, right? They quote that verse that how can a man do these miracles lest Yah be with him? Well, how did Jim Jones do those miracles? Was Yah with him at that time? Maybe Yah was with him for a while and then all of a sudden Yah wasn't with him anymore. Anyways, let's continue. Can you guys still hear me now? Am I back?
You've had threats on your life.
We don't talk about that.
All right. This person's just saying, how could a Christian believe the Jim Jones? Yeah.
We find it so difficult to believe that people can get caught up in cults. But once we study the process and see how slow and subtle it is, then what we're doing is we're seeing Jim Jones from the end. We need to see him from the beginning. And I haven't found one victim who didn't think that Jones began as a Bible-believing, loving, committed Christian. I haven't found one victim who didn't believe that he began that way. How he ended was something else again.
It's the same thing as Straightway. Almost everybody that I've known who's still there and the people who have left all say that, yes, Dowell probably did start off righteous. Now, the people who are still there, they think that he's still got the Holy Spirit and everything like that. And he made that video, Am I Called by Yah, right? Saul was called by Yah too. But at some point in time, the Spirit departed from him. And once it did, you saw him just become more and more tyrannical and just start getting more and more wild. That's the best way that I could put it.
Here's a call from a person who describes herself as a Christian and tells us we should not even be discussing Jim Jones on 100 Huntley Street.
Well, I'm sorry she's offended. But in fact, if we don't look at the cases where evil is at the cases where evil is working, we won't learn the lessons that Jesus constantly pointed to these negative examples and said, learn from this. Open your eyes that you might see from this. We have got to learn these lessons before it happens again to us. And to ignore the cults is to simply be more vulnerable to them.
Why don't we recognize deception?
All right. I'm going to stop the video there. I'll put this video in the description, the actual full thing. I actually meant to go through the whole thing, but maybe it's better that I didn't on this one because this video is already 45 minutes long. But there's a full hour and 20-minute video. This one, or I think it's just an hour long.
I'm Corey Raymond with
He goes through the whole entire thing. So there's stuff that they cut out within that interview. You know, stuff that was pretty important. I wish that I would have clicked on the right video, but I'm not going to go and do the whole thing over again. So I apologize. You guys go back and check out that other video. You're going to see the eerie similarities between Jonestown and Pastor Dowell. It's very, very obvious when you look at it. And then just look at, where did Dowell come from? Where did he get his information from? Where did R.G. Stair come from? Where did he get his information from? And then you'll know how these people are connected. It was just a cult movement that was going on. And these leaders, especially during the hippie movement, before the YouTube and everything like that, everything was on short wave radio. And so, what did you say, Pastor? That's so true. To ignore the cult makes people more accessible to them. Yep, 100%. 100%. Anyways, this video has been long enough. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is my first time doing live, so it's a little bit awkward. I got to get used to it. But bless you all. I appreciate you all coming in here and saying shalom. Read most of your guys' comments, but bless you. And I hope you guys have a great day, great rest of your week. And let me figure out how to end this. All right. Shalom, shalom.